will be a lot of bickering between the Gulf countries. The Gulf countries are going to go through a tricky time.
Well, and right now, economically, what they're experiencing, I mean, look, they aren't receiving shipments in, or what's coming in.
Kuwait zero, Larry. Kuwait has exported zero last month. Zero oil by Kuwait. That is insane. That's never hasn't happened since 1991.
Yeah, so and that has a definite financial impact. And this is where I think what Iran is negotiating now with these different countries is, hey, we can get you and your oil exports back up and running, but that means you've got to stop supporting and allowing Israel to use your territory to attack us, and you got to stop allowing the United States to use your territory to attack us. That's the non-negotiable point. Iran would prefer to get along with the Saudis and the Qataris for that reason. And I think Qatar actually recognizes that may be a viable way forward. Oman certainly does. You see this, half of the Strait of Hormuz is controlled by Iran. The other half is controlled by Oman because it's territorial water. You get 12 miles out. Well, that 12 miles covers that whole opening.
Imagine what happens to the Gulf. Kuwait, so there it is, during April 2026, so last month, I'm guessing we're May now, During April, last month, Kuwait exported 0 barrels of crude oil for the first time since the end of the Gulf War.
Yeah, and it's not just the crude oil. Then we're talking about the liquid natural gas, the LNG. We're Qatar, talking about urea. So, yeah, with all the different, let's say the traditional funding streams from these different exports, they're done for right. I mean, they're done. It's not like Iran. Iran still has, it still can get goods in from Pakistan and from Turkmenistan and even through the Caspian Sea. So this is the full weight of the economic crisis is going to hit the Gulf states. I think it's only in the next 2 to 3 weeks that's really going to impact. And then, as you know from living there, the summer heat, you get summer heat in May. That is it's brutal. And if there's shortages of electricity and not sufficient air conditioning, it makes a pretty tough life.
Especially the countries that have not diversified. There's countries that, like the UAE, seem probably the most diversified one with tourism and banking and all that. But countries like Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi to a lesser extent, Saudi's diversified slightly, but the others, they have zero diversification from exporting their oil. And so if the war resumes or the blockade does not lift, we really don't know what would happen to them.
Let me ask you a question. Do you have any sense of if there's been any significant change in air traffic in and out of, say, Dubai?
Yeah, so I haven't checked air traffic. I checked hotel occupancy, and I've asked people that live here, my trainer and all them. Life is going back to normal relatively quickly, but there's still, I checked about a week ago regarding hotel occupancies, down about 20 to 30% from what it was before the war. So still down, but it's very different. Like if I look out of my window, the traffic is less. But today I asked my trainer, because I said, actually, I'm interested about it. I asked my trainer, like, how things are so quiet in Dubai. He's like, one of my trainers is already starting to get booked up again, so people seem to be returning. But it's not at the level it was before the war. I think people are waiting to see what happens with the ceasefire. They're worried because Trump is still building up militarily. So I think what happens next could dictate the outcome for the UAE depends a lot on security and stability. The other countries depend a lot on being able to export their oil. And they don't have the alternatives that the UAE and Saudi have either. So they're wholly dependent. Kuwait wholly dependent on the Strait of Hormuz. So they're a very, very difficult position.
What percentage of oil can the UAE get out through?
Much less, yeah. Fujairah's capacity, I don't have the exact number, but it's much less. They do. The Strait of Hormuz is important for all of them, including Saudi. And Fujairah could also be struck. So if the war restarts, Fujairah is a target, and it was struck during the war. And the pipeline in Saudi was struck. The Houthis, that. The Houthis struck it years ago as well. It's a pretty easy target to strike. So they're like, if the war resumes, that would be pretty insane. Unless there's some deals happening behind the scenes with Iran, maybe some agreements that, hey, if the war restarts, we will do X, Y, Z if you don't strike us. And maybe those Gulf countries might already, may already start to kind of seek alternatives to having the US military presence in their country. Those discussions may be already being had right now. I'm sure they are.
Yeah.
I want to ask you about the Iran's counter proposal to the US. So Iran has submitted a 14-point proposal in response to the US 9-point proposal through Pakistani mediators, emphasizing a full end to the war rather than extending a ceasefire, according to Tasnim. The US suggested a 2-month truce. Iran is pushing for all major issues to be resolved within 30 days and for negotiations to focus on ending the conflict entirely. The proposal includes the following: demands guarantees against further attacks. It's fine, it's always been there, and that's very logical. Number 2, withdrawal of US bases from nearby regions. So they have the same demand, one would consider maximalist, of wanting US bases out of the region. They have the demand now. 3, lifting of the naval blockade. 4, compensation. So they haven't budged on anything. It's the same position.
Right.
5, release of frozen assets and sanctions relief, as well as end the fighting on all fronts, which is Lebanon right now. And lastly, establish a new framework for the Strait of Hormuz. Tehran is now waiting Washington's official response. Is Iran just waiting for Trump to get bored and walk away so then they can control the Strait of Hormuz and start doing what they plan to do and work on getting rid of the US bases?
Yeah, I don't think they're waiting. I think that's what they're doing. They're moving ahead. They control the traffic out of the Strait of Hormuz. And, again, the blockade, it's a blockade in theory, but not in practice, because it'd be one thing if U.S. ships were literally sitting, at the mouth of the Strait of Hormuz, which means they'd be within 12 miles of the Iranian coast. They're not doing that. They're staying 200 miles off, because if they get closer, they know they're going to get hit. So this, it's more, I think, more of the principle that, yes, some Iranian ships can be taken on the high seas. It's piracy. That's all it is. It's a pure form of piracy. So, yeah, they want that. Trump, from just a political standpoint, lift the blockade, back away. That's Trump's only out here. The thing is, I think Mario is going to bring it to a head, is the economic fallout. The markets are not acting normal. That if you go back and look at how the price of oil behaved during COVID, where there were not as many, you didn't lose 20% of the world's supply of oil at that time. It wasn't, the infrastructure wasn't damaged. And it wasn't just the infrastructure, it was other, they weren't going after the liquid natural gas and after the urea and so on. But we've got dramatic, significant disruptions in supply of critical commodities, and the Western markets are pretending, oh, don't worry about it. That's not for real. It's going to have an impact, and when it hits, it could hit within the next 2 to 3 weeks. There has been market manipulation to try to prevent this from coming to pass, but at some point they're going to run out of gas on that, and when that hits, then it's going to be a devastating global effect, and life is not going to go on as normal. So that I think will be the catalyst, either to finally bring the war to an end, for the United States to accede to what Iran's asking, or they'll decide to go for broke and attack Iran. I personally think they're going to go for the attack route, because they keep building up force. It's like building tension on a rubber band. You pull. At some point, it's going to snap. And if we were seeing the opposite take place, if they were starting to withdraw forces, they were starting to draw down. But
no indication of that.
Yeah,
no indication of that whatsoever.
Yeah.
There is. I spoke to today a professor, Steve Hank, from Johns Hopkins University.
Yes.
And he's been analyzing Iran for many, many years. And his analysis is the following. And obviously the global economy, he's been an advisor, a board member, and one of the policymakers in the UAE as well. And he said to me the following. First, he's obviously concerned for the Gulf. But when it comes to Iran and the rest of the world, in terms of the rest of the world, he was worried if this continues, we may be facing a global depression. And that's a pretty big word to use. And he thinks that the markets have not priced in where we're at today, let alone a continuation of the blockade. Right. And if the blockade continues, the consequences will be catastrophic across the world. That's number one. And number two, he even said the Iranian economy is doing worse than what the media is saying, and the inflation is higher. He monitors it on a daily basis. But he said the Iranians have significantly more resilience than the Americans and the rest of the world. And even though their economy is suffering, they won't blink because this is existential for them. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing that right now by seeing the demands by the Iranians as well. There's one other report that came out that I don't know who, I think Wall Street Journal, that the Iranians are planning, they're filling all their cargo ships. And what they want to do is they want to flood the blockade with all the ships. So you're saying even if they don't do that, a lot of the ships cannot be intercepted because of the limited number of warships that the US has. Yeah. What would happen if Iran just floods the entire blockade with all, a few dozen cargo ships? That would be there was a name for it in the article, but that would be a strategy that could work where Iran could do this every few weeks and just kind of flood the market out. So that's something that the US does not have the capacity to intercept unless they start shooting down cargo ships with fighter jets, which obviously what they won't do.
Yeah, no, that's the fact. It's just if the United States does not have enough ships in its current Navy to deploy and blockade to actually go in to port and keep any ship from sailing out. So Iran basically has free sailing out to about 50 miles off its coast. And the United States can't really do anything to intercept it. And even if they can intercept probably 1 out of 10 ships, but every time they do an interception, one of the things is they could use the destroyers which accompany the U.S. aircraft carriers to carry out these interceptions. But once you peel off those destroyers to do that, the destroyer's mission was to provide air defense, because they've got these air defense missiles on board to protect the carriers. So now they're no longer protecting the carriers, which means then Iran would be in a position potentially to attack those carriers, and they would have no defense. So there is not a good, clean solution here for the United States militarily on the naval front or on the aviation front, and heavens no, nothing on the ground front.
Do you know anything about, that's another important development, Trump just added a maximum pressure hawk to his Iran negotiating team, Nick Stewart from the FDD. Do you know him at all? So Trita Parsi is very critical, and others are being critical. Trump just added him as his chief of staff of the Iran Action Group he was the chief of staff of Iran's Action Group in Trump's first presidency, and he's part of the think tank, the FDD, the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies.